I'm going to explain to you the Great Depression right now. Ready? All right, so here's the situation. It's 1919, and we just kicked ass in World War I. Industrial growth and consumer spending are really, really, really on the rise. So the United States is producing more goods than it ever has, and people are spending more money than they ever had. Everyone is buying stocks. Like, every fucking one is buying stocks. The stock market is like fairly new at this point, so it's like the hot thing to do, to buy stocks. Everybody's like, oh, Sonny, if you're smart, you'll go play the market. You know, everyone thinks that that's like the smart thing to do, is to go buy stocks. To buy a stock means that you buy a little piece of a company, and then when that company makes money, you make a little money as well. I'm going to explain stocks a little bit more in just a minute here, so bear with me, but that's basically the gist of it. The stock market is fairly new, like I said, and it is like barely regulated at this point, so people are taking out loans from their bank to buy stock. To put this in perspective, buying stock is a huge gamble. So imagine if you went to Vegas and took money out on your credit card, like took a cash advance on your credit card to go play slots or go play poker or whatever. That's basically what it's like to take out a bank loan to buy stocks. Because remember, there's no guarantee that the business that you bought stock in is going to succeed and you're going to make money. You could lose all of that money if the business doesn't do well. So to take out a loan with interest to buy stock in a company is a very risky maneuver, but people don't really know that at this point. Today, you are not allowed to buy stock on credit, partially because of what happened. But it's 1920s, we're in the roaring 20s, we're partying, baby, we're doing amazing, and we are taking out hella loans to buy ourselves some stock. That's not the only thing people are taking out loans for, though. People are buying everything on credit, okay? We are in our credit era in the United States. Everybody is buying stuff on credit or on margin, which is what they called it back then. So everybody's buying their shit on credit, and at the same time, more products than ever are available to consumers. So there's more money than ever available to consumers through the credit system or the margin system, and at the same time, because of the industrial boom that we're seeing, more products than ever are available for people to buy on credit. So in this era, we're seeing the rise of Sears, for example, and these big catalog stores. So basically, there was no online shopping. Obviously, it's the 1920s. But what you could do is get a catalog sent to your house with all of these products in it, and then you'll write a letter back to the catalog people and tell them what you want, and then they'll send it to you. It's like the original Amazon. So now people have the ability to buy consumer products from the comfort of their home. In addition, cars are now becoming mainstream. Like, an average person could buy a car. We have sewing machines. We just have a lot more products available to people. And even here, see, in the fine print down here, it says easy payment plan. Payment plans were super, super common because I said everybody's buying stuff on credit. Okay, so let's say I make $3,000 a year. This is the average income in 1925. And business is booming. I'm doing great. I want to treat myself. So I buy a new wardrobe, new washing machine, new sewing machine. I renovate my house. I get a new car, a new vacuum. And I'm also investing in stocks because everybody's investing in stocks. And this is in addition to my regular expenses, okay? And this is for the year. And the way that I got these numbers is I looked at graphs of living expenses at the time, and then I looked up advertisements in 1925 for like the washing machine, sewing machine, whatever. So these numbers are pretty accurate, or at least as accurate as I could make it being alive in 2024 and not 1924. So I'm balling out, right? I'm treating myself. But here's the thing. I still only make $3,000 a year, okay? But I just bought almost $3,800 worth of shit. So now I'm $790 in the hole, right? And I know you're probably saying, Kat, how the fuck is that possible? You don't have that money. How are you buying these things? because I'm buying them on credit. So using the average interest rate for 1925, I divided everything by 12 for monthly payments for the smaller purchases, and then for like the house, the new car, and stuff like that, anything over $500, I divided it by 24 because you would realistically pay those things off over a longer amount of time. So now I have all of these expenses that I'm paying interest on through monthly payments. The only thing that I'm not paying interest on is my regular expenses, which is like house, food, medicine, etc. So here's the deal. I'm paying all these monthly payments now on all my new shit, but I'm not making any more money. I'm still only making $250 a month. So now we're cutting it super close because I only make $250 a month, but my monthly bills for all of the things that I bought on credit is $256. So I'm living paycheck to paycheck at this point, trying to pay all of this stuff off. So here's the thing. This boom in consumption brought a lot of money into the economy initially because everybody was spending their money. Everybody was buying new shit. But then after everyone buys all their new shit, they're saddled with all of these monthly payments and they're not buying any more new shit because they're still paying off the old shit. Additionally, like let's say I buy a washing machine. I'm not going to need a new washing machine for like at least 5 years. So these are all pretty much one-time purchases or once every few year purchases that I'm making. So it's not like this is a sustainable thing for me to keep doing, keep spending all this money and buying all this new stuff. So you're saying, Kat, what the fuck does this have to do with the stock market crashing? I'm going to explain it to you in a second, okay? So let's take a look. Let's say this is my business, Kat's Coffee. My business is worth $100. Somebody finds out about my business, finds out that my business is doing okay, and they say, this business is pretty successful. I should invest. So they invest $20 in my business. Because remember, when you invest in a successful business, you own a little piece of that company, and when that company makes money, you get a little bit of money back for the piece that you own. So they give me $20 thinking, this is a successful business. I'm going to invest because it's going to be worth it in the long run because I'm going to get a piece of the profit. Now, my business is worth $120. So a few more people see, oh, this business is pretty successful. We should invest. So now a few more people give me $20. Now my business is worth $160. People see that the value of my business is going up. They're like, oh my gosh, just a couple months ago it was worth $100. Now it's worth $160. That must mean she's successful. We should invest. So now a bunch more people are investing money in my business. Now my business is worth $200. It's doubled in value. So next, everybody goes, holy shit, this business just doubled in value. It must be so successful. We need to all invest. So the value of my business is going up and up and up through all of these investments. But that doesn't mean that my business is actually making a profit. Allow me to explain. So we're back to the beginning. My business is worth $100. But remember, we are in the middle of the debt crisis. So everybody has all of these monthly payments that they have to make. And so cash is super tight for everybody right now. And what's the first thing you cut when cash is tight? Going out to eat, buying coffee, frivolous purchases. So because everybody's trying to make their monthly payments, they're going to spend less money at my business. So now my business is really only worth $80. But people are still investing because they don't know that yet. Next, it's only worth $60, but people are still investing because they don't know that yet. Next, it's only worth $40, but people are still investing because they don't know that yet. Now, I'm bankrupt, and everybody who's invested in my business loses their money. I've lost all of my customers. I have $0 in the bank. I have to close my doors. I have to shut down, and all these people are fucked. They all lose their money. So remember, These guys all took out money from the bank to buy stock in my business. It's not like it's coming from their savings account. So when I close my doors, it's not like they're just losing their money. They're losing the bank's money, and they have to make interest payments still on that money. The bank does not care. All right, Great Depression, part 2. Let's dive in. Okay, so last video, we talked about the roaring 20s and how overconsumption and a rise in industrialization led to this huge bubble in the stock market being created, which eventually led to the stock market crash and everybody losing all of their shit. So if you haven't watched that part yet, go do a little swipe back in the playlist and watch that part first if you don't know about it, because this is going to be like crucial information moving forward. Okay, so we're opening on the stock market crash. Spoiler alert, this is a fucking disaster. Look, I even wrote it right here, disaster. That's how bad it was. It was really, really no good. Okay, so there are 3 major stock market crashes you need to know about in the Great Depression. A lot of people think there was just this one big crash, but there was actually 3, okay? Right now, it's still 1929, okay? So first, we have Black Thursday on October 24th. This is when the shit really hits the fan, okay? So this is when people start panic selling their stocks. What does panic selling mean? So remember last time when we talked about everybody's investing money in these businesses and the businesses are going up and up and up and up and up in value until eventually the business goes bankrupt because nobody can afford to buy anything anymore. Well, all of the people who had invested into the business up until that point have a lot of money in stocks in this business. As a general rule of thumb, when you are investing in stocks, you want to try and choose stocks that you think are going to be successful in the future. Because when I buy a share of stock in a company, I'm buying a little piece of that company, okay? And when that company makes money, I get a little bit of profit, but additionally, the value of the share that I purchased goes up. So let's say I buy a share of Bob's Bagels for $10, okay? Bob's Bagels, the business as a whole, is worth $100, and I bought a tenth of the business. So now I own $10 worth of that business. If Bob's Bagels does really, really well, then the value of his business is going to go up. So now his business is worth $200. So my 1/10 of the business that I own is now worth $20. So now if I ever want to sell that piece of stock that I bought, that piece of the company that I bought, I'm going to make a $10 profit because since I bought the stock, the company has gained value and the value of my shares have gone up. So that's why everybody was buying all of these stocks, right? Because not only do you get a portion of the profits, you also are thinking it's kind of like a savings plan because the value hypothetically of your stock is going up. So you think, well, if I'm ever in a tough spot, I can sell this stock and make a really nice payday. So then when the market crashes, everybody is running to the bank, rushing, or the financial trading centers, rushing to try and sell these stocks before they go so low that they're not going to make any money at all. People are trying to get whatever money out that they can. So like if I buy a share in Bob's Bagels and Bob's Bagels goes bankrupt, God, I should have chosen a different name for a business. Bob's Bagels is bankrupt. I am going to be running down to Goldman Sachs, right? Saying, I need to sell my stock. I need to sell my stock because I want to get whatever of my money back that I possibly can before my stock is worth absolutely zero. So everyone is trying to sell their stock. So Black Thursday, October 24th, 12.9 million shares are traded. Traded means sold. This puts the market in free fall. What that means is basically everybody is pulling their money out of the stock market, and that's causing the entire stock market in itself to completely collapse because everybody's pulling their money out of the stock market. Everybody's pulling their investments out of these businesses. So all of these businesses are going bankrupt. Here, if we zoom in, we have some pictures, okay? So you can see all of these people lining up outside a trading center to try and sell their stock. It's like mobs of people who are just lining up, like banging down the doors, basically trying to get in and sell their stock so they don't lose all of their fucking money. Because remember, like we talked about last time, people are buying these stocks on credit, okay? They're taking out loans to buy these stocks. So it's not like if the company goes bankrupt and their shares are worth nothing, oh no, I lost a few $100. It's like, I never had that money to begin with, and I still have to pay back the bank for the money that I borrowed to buy the stocks with interest. So all of these people are really on the hook here. Here's another picture. It says $100 will buy this car, must have cash, lost all on the stock market. So this is the situation. People are selling their clothes, their cars, their houses for anything that they can to try and pay back these interest-bearing loans that they took from the bank to buy stock that is now worthless. So Black Thursday happens and everyone tries to sell their stock and the market goes into free fall. So what happens is they actually close down the market on Friday and Monday to try and dissuade people from selling their stock. So sometimes the government will do this in the event of a market free fall to prevent people from selling more of their stock. Even though it seems detrimental to the situation, preventing people from selling more stock is the only way to correct a market in this situation, to correct the stock market, because the more people sell their stock, the worse this is going to get. Spoiler alert, people don't stop trying to sell their stocks. The markets open back up on Tuesday and everyone sells all of their shit. So October 29th, Black Tuesday, the markets reopen. Everyone sells their stuff. Like, everybody is selling their shit. And 16.4 million shares are sold. I can't even begin to describe how many that is. For 1929, this is an insane amount. Like, every single person who's bought stock within the past 10 years is selling it. Here's a newspaper from the time. You can see, once again, Wall Street's in panic, etc. And you can see all of the people just waiting outside these financial institutions. This is a picture from inside a stock brokerage, and you can see everybody's just so depressed. There's paper on the floor and shit. Everybody's trying to make trades as fast as they can. It's really just like terrible vibes. Vibes are bad, 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 no good. Fucking terrible, rancid. Something kind of funny though is, okay, so my grandma is 100 years old. She was born in 1924 and her birthday is October 17th. So right before Black Thursday. So her 5th birthday was October 17th, 1929. And I just think it's very cute that she probably had to have, like, she got to have one last good birthday. You know, they probably bought her so many presents and were on credit. I should ask her what that was like. She's still alive. I should ask her. But I think it might be insensitive, so I won't. Anyways, let's go move on. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? No. It's a depression, silly. So the 1929 stock market crash echoes literally around the world, but mainly in Western Europe. So Britain was already going through it in the 1920s. They were already in a very severe depression, and this made it way worse. This is the case in a lot of countries. Germany, in particular, really gets fucked on. Germany had invested a ton of money in the American economic system, and now it's all gone. This is no good because they were already in a very precarious financial situation. And now Germany is experiencing hyperinflation. And when I say hyperinflation, I mean like hyperinflation, baby. Money was literally worthless in Germany at this time period. This is kids. This is a picture of kids just playing with stacks of money because it's totally worthless at this point. You would have to like load the trunk of your car with paper money to go buy a loaf of bread. Like, it was fucking ridiculous. So this is really bad for Germany, and this is foreshadowing to how Hitler was able to rise to power. So we're going to talk about that in our World War II series, so just stay tuned on that. Additionally, we have the Dust Bowl, you guys. We have the Dust Bowl going on right now. And so thousands of people in the Midwest and Texas are like seriously suffering. Here are some pictures. I'm sure you've seen some pictures before, right? This is the Dust Bowl. Shit is no good. So farm production is way, way down. So the farmers are like already really, really, really struggling. And this makes it so much worse, you guys. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to film part 3 literally right after I post this. So it'll either go up tonight or like tomorrow morning. But stay tuned for more. Bye. All right, Great Depression part 3. Spoiler alert, trigger warning. We're going to be talking about Herbert Hoover quite a bit in this episode. Okay, so last we chatted, the stock market crash of 1929 had just happened. $30 billion was lost on the stock market over the course of these 2 days. People lost everything. It's a disaster. No good. We also touched on how the stock market crash is echoing throughout the world, particularly in Western Europe, but honestly in every continent. There's a really good YouTube video that I'll find a way to link for you guys somehow that goes into every continent and how it was affected by the Great Depression. Very good watch. Also, we're in the middle of the fucking Dust Bowl. So the farmers in America are already really, really struggling because part of the nation is being absolutely ravaged by these terrible droughts and dust storms. So that brings us to June 17th, 1930, when President Hoover, this man right here, passes the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. What this is essentially tariffs placed on foreign countries by the United States in an effort to protect businesses and farmers by reducing foreign competition. So his mindset is, okay, farmers are really struggling. The national income of farmers is way down. I'm going to put these tariffs on these foreign countries to decrease competition so that people are forced to buy American goods. So here's the problem with this master plan. It didn't fucking work. It didn't fucking work at all, actually. Because here's the deal. Okay, 2 things, actually. Number 1, the idea that we're going to place tariffs on these foreign governments to help the farmers sell their wheat, which is mainly what farmers were growing was wheat, to American citizens. We're in the fucking Dust Bowl, okay? There is no wheat, Herbert. There is no wheat. There's no wheat. What harvest are they selling? Where do you see in this picture fertile land for a wheat harvest? Okay, there is no wheat. So that's the first thing. Second of all, something very common that happens when a country places heavy tariffs on another country is that the country that the tariffs are imposed on will retaliate and place tariffs back on us. And let's remember, a lot of these countries are already struggling financially. So let's take Great Britain, for example. Imagine we put tariffs on Great Britain because we want people to buy our crops in America. We don't want them to send over their goods. So we put tariffs on them. They're going to say, fuck you, bro. We're literally in a depression too. Like, why would you even do that? And so they're going to go put tariffs on us. And during the 1920s, global trade was at an all-time high because remember, we just got out of World War I. So to put tariffs on is effectively stopping the cycle of that global trade. So a third thing is a lot of these farmers were buying like the seed, I guess, for their wheat from foreign countries. I'm not a farmer. I don't really know how it works, but they're buying, I guess, the seeds. Do you plant wheat with seeds? I don't know, but they're buying them from foreign countries because remember, we are in the Dust Bowl, okay? So it's not like we just have this plentiful bounty of crops to go around in the United States. So placing tariffs on a foreign country where the farmers are buying the seeds of their wheat is no good because when you place a tariff on a country, so like let's say I'm the president and I am like, I'm going to put a tariff on Great Britain because I don't want you buying your shit from Great Britain. That doesn't mean that Great Britain has to pay a tax when you buy stuff from them. That means when you buy stuff from Great Britain, you have to pay the tax. The American is the one who pays the tax. So now you've got these farmers that are already getting dicked over by the Dust Bowl, and you're just fucking them even harder with these tariffs. Here, I put in a political cartoon to kind of help explain it. This is from the time. So you can see we have the farmer right here, and then we have, this is supposed to be Hoover right here. And you can see Hoover is telling the farmer, it may not be perfect, but I'm sure it will help quite a bit. And then we have the scarecrow right here that says farm relief on it, which is supposed to be like the tariffs. And you can see the scarecrow is like not very good, and the farmer is looking at Hoover like, what in the actual fuck are you talking about, bro? And so this is a good explanation of how farmers are feeling about this new tariff system at the time. Because here's the deal, okay? We are in a crisis. It's not the time to be going all willy-nilly with new ideas, Herbert. It's just not the time for that. This is not the time to like let your creativity fly, okay? We are in trouble. It's not like, it's just no good. This is all no good. So now it's time for banking panic. You guys knew it was coming and it's here. So this is the first of 4 major banking panics or bank runs that happened during the Great Depression. You might have heard of a bank run before, and it's exactly what it sounds like. People are running to the bank trying to get their money out. Because remember, there is no FDIC, so there is no insurance on savings account. So if the bank closes, you're fucked. And remember in the beginning when we were talking about everyone buying their loans on margin? They're doing that from the bank. So when the financial panic happens, the banks are recalling all of these margin loans that they gave out for people to buy stocks. They said, it's my money and I want it now. Because don't forget, the banks are also playing the stock market. Like the big financial guys are all investing in the stock market as well. Think like JP Morgan, people like that. And so they just got fucked too when the market crashed. So they're like, give me my money back, please, with interest. Thank you. Like, think about, remember Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, that one little brat girl, Veruca, and she's like, but daddy, I want it now. That's the vibe that the banks are giving. They're like, I want my money right now, please and thank you. But guess what? Nobody can pay the banks because everybody's fucked right now. So nobody can pay the banks. You want your money? There is no money. There is no money, okay? So everybody is hustling over to the bank trying to get their money out because they know that if the bank closes, they're going to lose all of their money that they had in the bank. Just think about that for a second. Think about, like, I keep all my money in the bank, obviously. I think most of us do. So imagine a world where if the bank goes under, you lose all of the money that you have in the bank, and there's not shit you can do about it. I don't know about you, but I would be running down to JP Morgan Chase and getting my money out. These are a couple pictures of what a bank run looks like. You can see it's just people literally standing, waiting, like desperately hoping that they'll be able to get their money out before the bank closes and says, you're done. Here's another picture. This is at the American Union Bank. Mobs of people waiting outside. This picture is a painting. It's not from the Great Depression. It's actually from the 1837 market collapse, but I just really like it because you can really see the detail like that the artist put in. Look at the panic on these people's faces, right? Like, look at their expressions. Because like I said, imagine finding out that your life savings is disappeared, like poof, gone. Imagine what that would feel like to know that everything you've worked for is totally gone. Imagine the shock and like despair that the people are feeling right now, knowing that this is happening. It's truly, truly a crisis. Okay, guys? So of course, Herbert Hoover, L after L, this man is taking. Like, it's really blunder after blunder from Herbert. He says, that sounds like a you problem, babe. That's got not shit to do with me. I don't know what to tell you, basically, is what he says to the American people. So, of course, Herbert Hoover, our laissez-faire king, gives out $2 billion to bail out the banks, but he opposes direct federal relief for individual citizens. He's like, you guys, you don't need that. Like, have you tried smiling more? This relief program for the banks, not for the people, we don't need relief for the people, is called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and it is paid for by the taxpayer. By the way, $2 billion back then is $42 billion today, in case you were wondering. So social Darwinism is a really prominent idea at this time. You've probably heard of Darwinism, like survival of the fittest. Social Darwinism means it's kind of the same thing. So basically, people who subscribe to that believe that if you're poor, that's your fault for being stupid and poor. And there's nothing it's not our responsibility to help you, because if you're poor, that's on you. So Hoover kind of subscribes to this set of beliefs and puts together this program that literally doesn't fucking work. Like, a lot of the banks fail anyways, and that's really the kicker, is it. All right, you guys, now it's time for Great Depression Part 4. In the last few videos, we've really focused heavily on the financial stuff with like banks and the market and everything. So thank you for bearing with me. In this video, we're going to get way more into how individual people were affected. So last episode, we touched on the Dust Bowl, the banking panics, and President Herbert Hoover fucking us frontwards, backwards, and sideways. So we talked about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and we also talked about the Reconstruction Finance Corporations, which was when the Hoover administration gave out billions of dollars to bail out banks that were in danger of failing during the Great Depression. Spoiler alert, this literally didn't fucking help at all. A lot of the banks failed still, and a lot of people lost their life savings. So this is really a turning point in public opinion during the Great Depression, because beforehand, everyone was just kind of flailing. It's just chaos everywhere. Now the dust is settling a little bit, and everyone's looking around and saying, you know, I don't think this Hoover guy knows what he's doing. So just to give a little temperature check on what's going on at this point, the unemployment rate is at 33% for white Americans. For Black Americans and other racial minorities, it's at 50%. Everybody is getting fired because all of these businesses are closing and nobody has money, basically. Everybody's broke. A lot of people are losing their houses because they can't pay their mortgage, or selling their houses to pay off debt. They're selling their cars, their whatever items that they have that they can sell, they're selling them, they're gone. And so everybody kind of blames Hoover for this because he kind of fucked it up really badly. So people who lose their homes set up these encampments and call them Hoovervilles. This is an example of a collection of kind of shanty houses that are set up very quickly in the wake of the Great Depression and this huge, huge percentage of the population losing their housing. So here's a couple more pictures. This one is really interesting to me. It's a picture, obviously, of a temporary housing situation. And you can see, though, it says Hoover's Poor Farm, okay? And then here it says hard times are still hoovering over us. It's not funny, but, like, it is a little bit funny. Like, that's a good one. They got him with that one. But yeah, so these are the vibes. Really, really bad. Really, really rancid, bad vibes. Like, this is really bad. There are some sources that say that in the peak of the Depression in like 1933, where we are right now, up to 1,000 foreclosures a day were happening in the United States. So many people are losing their homes. I cannot stress this enough. And now, obviously, this is America, right? In the 1930s. Need I say more? And so we are deep in Jim Crow. It's a very racist society, and Black Americans are being impacted disproportionately on like a very grand scale. Because here's what's happening. White people are pushing Black people out of lower paying positions because Black people are already experiencing a crazy amount of racism in the country during this time. So they're already being paid less than white people and taking positions that are lower paid than what white people are taking. But when white people start getting fired from their middle class jobs, they're desperate, right? So they're looking for jobs that are low, like they're willing to take whatever job they can get. And it's America in the 1930s. So just let's marinate in that for a second. A racist business owner is always going to fire a Black man so he can give a white man a job. And that's just the situation that we're in right now. And that is no fucking good. So it's estimated that for Black Americans by 1932, the unemployment rate was 50%, you guys. That's 1 in every 2 people, okay? So if you are living with 3 other people, 2 of y'all don't have jobs. And this is happening to a group that's already being discriminated against in so many other ways. So this just becomes this vicious cycle, and it like piles on top of each other and just makes the experience for Black Americans vastly different than the experience for white Americans during the Depression. Obviously, it sucked for everybody, but I don't think it's hard to come to the conclusion that if you're already a part of a racial minority that's experiencing discrimination, once we are in a countrywide, a nationwide crisis, the discrimination is only going to get worse because now it's like a dog-eat-dog society. So all these charity organizations who are being run by white people, they're like, well, we need to help our own people. We're not going to go help those people. Like, we need to help our people first because they're little bitches. And it's just it's a bad situation for Black Americans. Some pictures that I wanted to show you. This one is during a protest about employment discrimination. You can see they're holding signs that says Ford discriminates against American workers. Show your belief in democracy. Don't cross the picket line. This one I think is really powerful. It's a group of Black people in line for charity aid during the Great Depression. And then in the background is this fucking billboard with these white people in it that says there's no way like the American way. And I think this is just very prominent, especially because, like we mentioned, a lot of charity organizations were refusing help to Black families at this time. And really anybody who's a racial minority in the United States is experiencing this same effect. The reason why I'm talking about the Black population so heavily is because that's where the most available data is, and because they were the largest racial minority in the United States at the time. So there's the most firsthand accounts from that group when I was doing my research. But I want you to understand that basically anybody who's not white at this time is experiencing harsh discrimination on top of the economic crisis. And like the rest of America, this group is heavily blaming Herbert Hoover for the situation. Because remember, Herbert Hoover is a Republican, and at this time, Republicans are the party of abolition. They're like the progressive party, okay? And so Black people are looking at Herbert and they're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what the fuck? And this brings us to FDR's election. So in 1932, FDR wins by a fucking landslide, you guys. Everyone is so done with Herbert. They're like, you're out of here, buddy. We are so over your shit. Because remember, Herbert Hoover is a social Darwinist. He believes in laissez-faire, hands-off governing. And he's vehemently opposed to giving direct federal relief to the people. And the people are really struggling right now. And so that's not a good combination. FDR, on the other hand, is running on the platform of the New Deal. You guys have probably heard of the New Deal. So FDR is running his campaign on this platform saying, if you guys elect me, I promise I will help you. I will help make this better. I will give relief to citizens, and I am going to try my very best to fix this shit show. So Herbert totally wipes out. FDR wins by a landslide. And like I just mentioned, Black Americans are instrumental in FDR's election. And this is what starts the shift of the Republican and Democratic parties. Have you ever wondered about, like, how come Republicans were the party of abolition and Democrats were the racist people, but now it seems like it's kind of switched and, like, Democrats are more, like, leftist leaning and more socially progressive, and Republicans are seen as more conservative? This marks that switch. Because I don't know if you noticed from all the blue right here, FDR is a Democrat, but he's running on this New Deal platform, on this platform of national relief. And so people kind of put the social policies aside for a second and vote for him, especially Black Americans. And so this is what starts to kind of make that shift that we see now so many years down the line, 100 years later, of how the parties have, like, completely flip-flopped. This is the catalyst of that shift. Okay, this feels like a good stopping point, so I'm going to end it here. And in part 5, we are going to go into the New Deal, my favorite part, and we're going to talk about the relief programs that start kind of popping up in the United States. All right, you guys, it's that special time. It's time for Great Depression Part 5. Okay, so last video, we got into the impacts on individual people of the Great Depression. We talked about how Black Americans were disproportionately affected, and we got to FDR being elected. That's where we left off. We also talked about how Black Americans were instrumental in FDR's election and how this kind of is the catalyst of the shift of the Republican and Democratic parties. If you haven't watched part 4, go back, watch that. For the rest of you, let's get into part 5. So FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is inaugurated on March 4th, 1933. One thing to know about our man Franklin is he is booked and busy, okay? He's inaugurated March 4th. A few days later, he calls an emergency Congress session because he's like, we have got to get this bitch under control. Like, we are a nation in crisis. We've got to get this handled. To do a little temperature check on how everything's going right now, everything's going fucking terrible. Everything's still really bad. At this point, just in 1933, by the way, just in 1933, and it's only March, 4,000 banks have closed and unemployment is still rising. It's almost like all that money Herbert Hoover gave to bail out the banks didn't fucking do anything. But now we are in our federal relief era. Thank fucking God. FDR creates the NRA. No, not that NRA, silly goose, the National Recovery Administration. And when I say this man gets to work, I mean he gets to fucking work, okay? We're going to do a quick rundown of all of the relief items that FDR kind of pushed through as part of the New Deal. I can't go super in depth on all of them because there's so many. So I'm going to just give you the brass tacks on each one. And if you want to look into it further, I would highly, highly encourage that you do your own research. I could talk for hours about each one of these different relief efforts. So we're just going to kind of do a brief rundown. Okay, so up first, we've got the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. This provided jobs in national parks and rec areas, think like Yellowstone, things like that, to young men who needed work. A lot of these jobs were like manual labor, like here's a picture. A lot of them is like digging trenches, building walls, like public works, landscaping, shit like that. Here's another picture. This is an ad for the CCC, a young man's opportunity to work. So here's something I want to bring up. These guys are all white. The CCC was open to Black men, but there was still a fucking ton of discrimination. I think the CCC employed like 3 million young American men, but only 200,000 of them were Black. So that's less than 10%, which is not ideal. And a lot of it was like segregated. So there would be like groups of Black men who would work here and then groups of white men who would work there. It was very segregated. It was very discriminatory. Not great, but good for the economy, not great in terms of like civil rights and stuff like that. So I just want us to keep that in mind, that even though FDR did a lot of really good things to get us out of the Great Depression, this is still America in the 1930s and racism is still very much prevalent. So just something to keep in mind as I'm telling you this, most of these programs are benefiting white men the most. This is another picture of the CCC. See how there's these little tents up here? Most of the time, you would like go work on site. So if you got employed by the CCC, you would like leave for 6 months, go work at a national park, digging trenches and shit. You would live there, like camping there, and then you would come home. A lot of the employment-based programs, like the CCC, were meant to be temporary. That's why we don't hear about the CCC today, but we do hear about something like the Security and Exchange Commission or Social Security. Those are financial programs that are still in place, but most of the employment-based programs were meant solely to give Americans jobs, white Americans, to get out of the Depression. Next, we have the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. This provides loans and subsidies directly to farmers in the USA. Why is this important? Remember, at the very, very beginning, we're in the Dust Bowl. We are in the middle of the Dust Bowl right now. And remember, Hoover doesn't want to give direct federal relief to the farmers. He puts tariffs on instead, and that fucks everything. So FDR is giving relief to the farmers. Here, this is where we were. FDR is giving relief to the farmers. The Tennessee Valley Authority provides electricity to people who live along regions of the Tennessee River that previously there was no electricity. The Glass-Steagall Act, this is huge, okay? This is still around today, and this is a big one. Glass-Steagall Act created insurance for bank deposits in case of bank failure. So now, you and me today, our money that's in the bank is protected because of the Glass-Steagall Act. We all, you and me, have FDIC insurance on our bank accounts for up to like $200,000 or $250,000, which means if Chase Bank fails tomorrow, our money is going to be safe. Unless you have, I think if you have more than $250,000 in the bank, you need to get like separate insurance for that. But who the fuck in this day and age has more than $250,000 in the bank? Like, let's be so real. So not only is he doing all of this shit, a lot of this stuff that happened is within the first 100 days of his presidency. This is why you always hear people yapping these days about the first 100 days. What are they going to do in the first 100 days? Nobody gave a fuck about the first 100 days before FDR. The reason that we care now is because he did so much shit within the first 100 days that he kind of sets the standard moving forward. So along with all of these different acts that he's putting in place to kind of give relief to the American people, he's also doing something called a fireside chat. This is huge. The fireside chat is where President Roosevelt, FDR, would get on the radio and talk to the American people and give them updates about what's going on in the Depression. How are we doing? What's the temperature? And this was huge at the time because you got to understand, there was no television, okay? Radio was just becoming popular. So the American people had never had access to a president like this before. Before this, the only time you heard from the President of the United States was either reading about something that they did in the paper, or if you were like lucky enough to go to a rally that they were at and hear a speech firsthand. But the most American people had not ever heard the president's voice before. So for FDR to get on the radio and address the American people directly and say, this is what we're doing to help you, here's how everything's going, it was just a huge, huge, huge thing. Like, people loved the fireside chat, okay? After the first fireside chat in 1933, the White House got 400,000 unsolicited letters from people saying how much they fucking love the fireside chat. Here's a picture. These are the vibes. So there's a microphone over here somewhere, and he's just talking, like he's just chatting. And nobody in America had ever heard the President of the United States speak in such a conversational tone and address them as though they're peers, okay? So this was like literally a game changer. Okay, so now it's 1934, second year of Roosevelt's first term. Congress passes the Securities and Exchange Act, which creates the Securities and Exchange Commission, aka the SEC. You've probably heard of the SEC before. If you followed Martha Stewart's documentary, she was investigated by the SEC. What the Securities and Exchange Commission does is investigate things like insider trading, market manipulation, just general shady business in the stock market financial sector. And the goal with this is to restore American confidence in the financial system. Because remember, after the 1929 crash, nobody's investing. Like, everyone's keeping their money under their mattress. They're like, fuck that. There's no way. There's no way that you're getting my money. Everyone had just lost thousands of dollars. Well, white Americans had just lost thousands of dollars. Notably, the Securities and Exchange Commission did not do anything to prevent discrimination against Black or other racial minority families in the banking industry. So that was no good. Like I said, this is 1930. So every time I tell you about this, just remember to look at it through the lens of like a white man. Like, this is mainly helping white men, if we're being real. All right, you guys, we are in the home stretch. This is Great Depression, final part 6. Let's go. All right, so we left off talking about the New Deal, which is the different acts and government relief programs that FDR is putting in place to get us out of the Depression. I'm going to try and run through the rest of this quickly because I'm like low-key getting bored of talking about the Depression, which is insane to me because when I was a kid, I literally had a Great Depression birthday party because I was so obsessed with it. Okay, so we are in our recovery era. FDR is booked and busy. He's getting us back on track. So where we left off, FDR had just established the Security and Exchange Commission to restore Americans' confidence in the market post-1929 crash. Next, we get the National Housing Act. This basically establishes a federal housing administration to facilitate like home financing, improve housing standards, and jobs for home construction. Next, we have the Wheeler-Howard Act. It also goes by a different name, which I think is offensive probably, and so I'm not going to call it that. But if you look up the Wheeler-Howard Act, a different name might come up. But anyways, the Wheeler-Howard Act was the first piece of government legislation to protect Native American lands and like safeguard tribal leadership. Because basically up until this point, we were just fucking the indigenous people over for like time and time again. I mean, we still are pretty much, but like this is like basically a way to like kind of make it better, but it kind of doesn't help at all actually. So let's just disregard this. You can look into it more if you want to. It was a good try, but it really didn't fucking help at all actually. 1935, we have the Works Progress Administration. This was a huge one. This is like the cornerstone, if you will, of the New Deal. This is like the crown jewel, okay? The Works Progress Administration. The Works Progress Administration basically employed Americans, mostly white men, in public works jobs. So think like sewers, bridges, roads, potholes, trains, railroads, etc., so on and so forth. And this, the Works Progress Administration, is like a double whammy, right? Because you're giving jobs to Americans, which is helping to uplift the economy post-depression. You're also, at the same time, building up public infrastructure and making America a better place to live. Next, we have the Wagner Act. This is a big one too, because what this did was give workers the right to unionize and participate in a collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is when, basically think about if we're all employees, right? And we work for a shitty boss. If I just go to my shitty boss and say, give me a raise, he's going to say, go fuck yourself. No. But if we all get together and go to our shitty boss and say, you need to give us all a raise or we all quit, there's a lot higher of a chance that the shitty boss is going to give you all a raise because he doesn't want to deal with that. So previously, before the Wagner Act, companies could tell workers that they are not allowed to unionize. Now, post-Wagner Act, your job, unless, okay, for very specific industries, this is not the case, but for most industries, like the chances are your job cannot tell you that you're not allowed to form a union. They have to let you form a union if you want to. For most industries, there's some like acting, it's weird. There's some where it's different, but for most jobs, you can unionize thanks to the Wagner Act. Finally, we have the Social Security Act. You have probably heard of Social Security. This provides safety net funds to elderly people at first and then later on disabled people. So, you know income tax, right? We all pay income tax. Basically, a percentage of our income tax goes into the pool for Social Security, which when we're older, hypothetically, we'll be able to draw from that pool based on how many taxes we paid when we were working. And I actually have a real world example of this because my parents are both in their 60s and one of them is on Social Security. So what they do to determine how much money you get from Social Security is they take your 7 best years of income, your 7 highest earning years. So, for example, my dad and my mom both have looked into getting Social Security. My dad's Social Security checks are going to be a lot higher than my mom's because he made more money than her when they were both working. But to determine it, they take your 7 highest earning years. So that way, like, let's say you have like a really big job, you know, and you're making a lot of money, then you kind of fall off a little bit. Those years where you were earning a lot of money count towards your Social Security. So that's 1935. We're recovering, we're living, we're laughing, we're loving. And then we get to 1937, 1938. 1936, we're just like chilling, basically. So you thought it was over, but we're so back. It's time for more depression. We love more depression. We are so excited for more depression. So previously, the United States was like really recovering well. Then we have a recession within the depression, a depression recession, if you will. From May 1937 to June 1938, there's like a year and a month where we just kind of fall off. Unemployment rises, so now it's like 20%, a little bit higher maybe again. Industrial production decreases by 37%. So this is no good. Like, are you fucking kidding? Like, imagine you are like an average American person and finally shit is starting to get a little bit better. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, more depression, bitch. You're done. So let's quickly run through some possible causes. I say possible because nobody 100% knows how these things happen. Economics is a science, but it's not like an exact science, okay? There are formulas and shit that you can use to kind of try and determine the outcome of things. But the thing about economics is it's mostly reactionary. So it's like something happens, like a depression, and then we look back to say, why the fuck did this happen? But most scholars and literary sources will agree that these are like the 3 main causes. So the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is basically the big daddy of all of the banks. They are a government organization and it's basically like the country's bank. But you can't go and open an account with the Federal Reserve. At least I don't think you can. They basically act as like the oversight of how much money the United States has in circulation, and they also provide regulation for the banks. So the Federal Reserve wants to prevent credit expansion. Why do they want to prevent credit expansion? Because we just had a fucking credit crisis that caused the largest depression in the history of the world. So now that everything's like fine and dandy again, they're, you know, looking at the banks who are licking their chops and they're like, nuh-uh, honey, like, don't you even fucking think about it, bitch. Because it's the banks giving out loans left and right that got us into this mess in the fucking first place. So the Fed decides they're going to increase the reserve requirement so that banks don't just have all this extra cash on hand that they can loan out willy-nilly. So the reserve requirement is how much cash banks are required to keep on hand. There's a certain amount of cash that banks have to have in their reserves at all times. So like, let's say the reserve requirement is $100, but my bank has $200 on hand. That means I can loan $20 to 5 people. Now let's say the Fed raises the reserve requirement to $180, but I still have only $200 cash on hand. I can only loan $10 to 2 people. This kind of fucked everything up, to be honest. In addition, the United States Treasury, which is like, think of it as like the Federal Reserve's sister, slows the process of gold being added to our monetary base. So back then, all of our money used to be backed by gold. So basically, hypothetically, all the money in circulation in the United States, there was that amount of gold somewhere in the US. It used to be called Fort Knox. Also, taxes had gone up because of all of the federal relief programs. So this was obviously super embarrassing for everybody. So the Fed and the Treasury walked back the federal or the reserve requirement and the gold stuff, and everything got better. It was fine. 1941, we are so back, kind of, like we said before. For Black Americans and racial minorities, unfortunately, the Depression lasted a lot longer than for white people because America is racist. Next, it's December 8th, and we join World War II, baby. Up next, we're going to do a Great Depression Q&A, and then we're going to get started on World War I and World War II. Also, YouTube is up. It's the same username as my TikTok, and the link is also in my bio. Thanks, guys. Bye. All right, guys, this is going to be the Q&A video for the Great Depression. If you haven't watched the Great Depression videos yet, definitely go to my bio and click on that playlist and watch the videos. Otherwise, this won't make sense to you at all. So I'm doing this to answer the questions that I saw commented pretty frequently. So something that you guys were asking a lot about is how were Black families impacted by the credit crisis? So we talked about how Black Americans were disproportionately affected during the actual Great Depression, but we didn't really touch on how they were impacted by the credit crisis. So let's get into that quickly. So I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to you given everything we've talked about. But Black Americans were rarely given the same opportunities that white Americans were given for credit and banking. This is because we are in Jim Crow era United States at this point in the 1920s and 1930s, and everybody's super fucking racist. So it's not that hard to make the connection that if most banks are owned by white people, they're not going to extend credit to Black people. If Black people were able to secure credit from a white bank in like an extreme circumstance, they were subject to much higher interest rates than white people. So in the event that they couldn't pay their loan back, which like nobody could after the stock market crash happened, they had to pay way more interest on those loans than white people did, like almost double. With that being said, there were a few Black credit unions that started to pop up in the 1920s. This obviously was going to be in areas that were more tolerable, like think the Great Migration cities, so like Chicago, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. It is a myth that cities in the North were just like a haven for Black people. There was still a ton of racism in places like Chicago and Philadelphia, etc., but it was a little bit better. So this is where a lot of Black-owned credit unions started to pop up. So here's some pictures. These are the founders of the Mechanics and Farmers Bank. This is another picture of, I don't know what bank this is, but you can see it's a Black-owned credit union from around the 1920s. So yeah, there were a few, but it wasn't like super, super common, obviously. Piedmont Credit Union was the first Black credit union that I could find from my research, but there might be one that came before that, but that was the first one that's like in the record. While loans from banks were definitely less common, it was more common for Black Americans to have access to what we call store-based credit. That means like afterpay, basically. Like if I went into a store and wanted to buy a pair of shoes and I couldn't afford them, the store back in the 1920s would have given me like a payment plan. This is obviously also going to be in places that have a high concentration of Black-owned grocery stores. This was especially common in catalogs as well, because the thing about a catalog is when you write a letter to the catalog people saying what you want, remember when we talked about like the Sears catalogs, they don't know if you're Black or white. So that gave Black Americans a lot more freedom to buy things because they could do it anonymously from their home, and those catalogs also offered payment plans. So that was another way for Black Americans to access credit. So basically what you need to know is while Black Americans could access credit, it was a lot more difficult. They were subjected to a lot higher interest rates, and it just wasn't really as common as for white Americans. Okay, next I want to talk about the Repatriation Act because I am so fucking stupid and I forgot to talk about it the first time. So the Repatriation Act was an effort to address unemployment and hostility towards Mexican immigrants. And by unemployment, I don't mean Mexican unemployment. I mean white people who think that Mexican people are taking their jobs. One thing about the U.S. is we will be hostile towards our immigrants. All right, this is a tale as old as time, baby. Doesn't matter what time period we're in. If we got immigrants, we will be hostile. So trigger warning, this is really fucking sad. So yeah. So there were these repatriation drives, which were informal raids that deported 1.8 million people of Mexican descent from the U.S. back to Mexico. Informal is key because this technically wasn't like a law enacted by Herbert Hoover, but he was very supportive of it. His slogan was American jobs for real Americans. So you can guess what his stance is on immigrants. So they basically were just rounding up anybody who looked Mexican and driving them over the border to Mexico and just dropping them like in the fucking desert. It was not organized at all. It was largely like informal, just kind of willy-nilly. Here's the deal. 60% of the people they rounded up were US citizens, all right? They were not checking. It was like very racist. It was just like if you looked Mexican, they were gonna get your ass over the border. It was really, really fucked up and bad. Another important thing to note is this literally didn't fucking help at all. This literally did not solve the problem even a little bit. I'm gonna read you this quote from an academic paper that was written by the Nonpartisan National Bureau of Economic Research, and they're talking about the Repatriation Act. It says, the repatriation of Mexicans who were mostly laborers and farm workers reduced demand for other jobs mainly held by natives. They mean people who are white Americans, basically, not like Native Americans, such as skilled craftsmen and managerial, administrative, and sales jobs. In fact, our estimates suggest it may have further increased the levels of unemployment and depressed wages. So yeah, it's almost like rounding up people who are doing jobs that nobody else wants to do anyway, and deporting them makes our economy fucking worse. It's almost like that's what happens literally every fucking time we try and do that. Here are some pictures. This is relatives and friends waving goodbye to a train carrying 1,500 people being expelled from Los Angeles back to Mexico. This was in 1931. Okay, so many people asked this question. Like, I think at least 100 of you asked me this in the comments. A lot of you asked, so when these people are selling stock during the 1929 crash, who is buying the stock? So the stock market is super complicated, and I'm not a financial advisor, but the short answer is nobody is buying the stock. Basically, when people say that they're selling shares or selling stock, what they really mean is they're trying to sell it. Think of it like an auction, okay? I'm going to show you a little diagram. Let's say I own one share of General Motors, and that's worth $20. That's how much I bought it for. Everyone pretty much agrees during normal market circumstances that this one share is worth $20. They get that estimation from like how much the business is worth, how much profit they have, and how much everybody else is buying GM stock for. If I want to sell that share of stock, I basically put it on the market at auction. It's not like a literal auction. This is all happening lightning fast, but I'm slowing it down and breaking it down this way to kind of help explain. So think of it like an auction. I'm selling my one share of General Motors stock, going once, going twice, whatever. Typically, under normal market conditions, I'm not going to really have a problem selling this share of General Motors for whatever the agreed upon value is, in this case, $20. If I had bought it for $10 a couple years ago, I would be making a profit off of that sale. If the value of the business has dropped since then, I'm going to lose money because the value of the stock that I have is worth less than when I bought it. In the event of a market collapse, everybody is selling their stock super rapidly, okay? Like everyone's trying to sell all at once. This drives the value of the stock down like at extreme levels super, super quickly. So let's say at the beginning of the day, my share is still worth $20. Then a few people sell, the value drops to 19. Then a few people sell, the value drops to 15, then to 10, then to 5, then to 3, then to 0, and now it's worth nothing. That's basically what happens, and this is all happening super, super fast in the event of a market crash because a lot of businesses are going bankrupt and also everybody's trying to sell their stock. So it's like the combo of those two factors. So yeah, nobody's buying the stock. Nobody's buying it. But that is a really good question that you all were asking. Okay, I saw a few of you asking about organized crime during the Great Depression, so let's get into that quickly. So organized crime actually really started having their moment around the Prohibition era, so like between 1920 and 1933. They were making a ton of money off of bootlegging and like selling alcohol because making alcohol illegal doesn't make people stop wanting to get drunk, it seems. Shocker on that one. Here are some pictures. This is distillery equipment for making like the illegal alcohol. This is another picture of some organized crime guys posing with all of their bootleg gin. And this is a picture of bathtub gin. You've probably heard of bathtub gin. It's exactly what it sounds like. They would be making gin in the bathtub. So in 1929, they were pretty concerned that Prohibition was going to be ending soon. So all the mobsters got together and held a national conference in Atlantic City, and they decided they need to kind of diversify their business ventures. So they got really into racketeering and loan sharking instead. In other news, YouTube is up. I know a lot of you have been asking about it. So when a series is complete, I'm going to be posting the completed videos on YouTube. So by the time you watch this, Great Depression will be on YouTube. I'm also going to have playlists for each topic for further research of like my favorite documentaries about each topic. So this is